Salman, I'll begin with a question for you. Both in writing the book and now in making the film, has it been a difficult process for you to not feel as if you're continually re-traumatizing yourself, forcing yourself to relive the attack?
Not so much re-traumatizing. I think that the difficult bit is being drawn back into a narrative that I'm trying to move on from. You know, but on the other hand, both the projects, I think, were, for me, necessary in order to be able to do something else. I had to do this first. I had to deal with this very large event in my life before I could even think about doing anything else. So it was necessary.
Because, Eliza, you begin filming so early in his recovery, and it's wonderful. There's a moment where you ask his permission. Can you talk about just that impulse? Like, what was it that made you initially pick up that camera?
Well, he asked me to. So there was a moment where he asked me on my iPhone, would I take a photo of him each day, a portrait? And I said, well, I think I can do better than that since I'm a photographer. And so I had my cameras and things sent to me from New York, from our home. And so once I had the camera, then we began to have these kind of conversations and a visual diary of what our journey would be like. So the footage happened because he asked me, and then I one-upped him.
Yeah, well, it's much better that it is filmed rather than just snapped on an iPhone, because first of all, it's very well filmed, I think. There's that. I think even Alex was impressed.
Indeed.
By the cinematography.
But where did that impulse come from for you, sir?
I just felt that there's a reason to make a record of this. And as I say in the film, it's because it's not only about me. You know, there are big principles here of freedom. And also just, I thought, maybe to drive that home to people by showing them what a terrorist attack actually looks like, close up. And yeah, I had to give up a lot of my personal pride because I don't look very good at the film.
And Alex, I'm curious for you, do you even see the film as an adaptation of the book? Like, what do you see as the relationship between those two things?
It's funny because the film actually started before Salman had written the book. I mean, I think he was working on it, but still, I got back around to something simpler as the editing process continued, which was to actually incorporate the writing of the book in the film, because that writing is something also Salman said he had to go through in order to be able to get to the other side. So I felt it was terribly important actually to use the writing. So even though it didn't start there, it ended up there.
And then what was it like for you just as a filmmaker to have this trove of footage that they were making themselves?
Well, it was extraordinary. And the first question I asked them is, don't you guys want to make this film yourselves? And for various reasons, they wanted another person's perspective on it, that they were too close. And so it was vital. I mean, Eliza's footage is extraordinary, and Salman's bravery in terms of exposing himself and that vulnerability was tremendous. But to me, I took the project on as a portrait of recovery, and as Salman says, sort of moving from an act of hate to a place of love. But it was also a way of, you know, that's the simple story. Is, you know, you're almost killed, and then you get back to health, and your fingers are working. But then there was this business of reckoning with the past and your own personal memories and how you free associate, all of which is in the book. But I felt it was important to really reckon with that cinematically.
Because, Salman, can you expand a little on what you just mentioned, that to you, the story of the book, the story of the film is not just your story, that there is something larger at play here?
Well, there's just the issue of free expression, you know, is one of the kind of overarching subjects. But it's also that when I was thinking about it, I thought about it as a kind of me at the center of an argument between hatred and love. You know, that there are two forces in the film. One is deeply negative and the other is beautifully positive. And I thought that's something to write about, that's something to make a film about, to talk about, in a way, for people to come to the film thinking they're going to get a kind of true crime story, and what they actually get is kind of love story. You know, I thought that would be a nice twist.
I also want to add to what Salman was saying, which is that having the camera in the trauma ward in our days, it gave us during that time a way to kind of come back to who we were, because we could kind of tell each other stories. We could kind of film funny moments. We could have date nights. We could dance around to Bob Dylan. It was about kind of recording the joy as much as recording the trauma, the violence, and all of that. And I think at first when we were making the recordings, we really weren't sure where this footage would go. For a while we thought, we're going to make this footage. We will have this this documented material. But Salman didn't see the footage until we really were able to go home. And once he was recovered enough where he thought he
she
could
wouldn't
see
let me
it.
see it.
Yeah, that's true too.
She wouldn't let me see it because I looked so terrible.
Yeah.
And it was only after I was substantially recovered
Yeah.
that she said, "Okay, are you ready to watch this?" And set up a screen and a projector.
And after we watched it together, then I think that was the momentum then of we're going to take this somewhere beyond us. Yeah.
Because there's a line in the book that I find so striking. I'm paraphrasing here, but you say, anyone who comes here looking for regrets, you can leave right now.
Yeah.
And can you talk about how your just personal perspective on the Satanic Verses and what you've been through, how has that changed over the years?
Well, first of all, it's a very long time ago. You know, so it's most of my books have been written since then. You know, so it feels to me like a book I wrote when I was much younger. You know, I mean, when it came out, I was 41 years old. Now I'm 78. You know, so it's been a while, and it feels to me like this younger man's book. You know, and I feel very proud of it. You know, I think the book was subjected to such a colossal attack that many books would have disintegrated under the strain of that. You know, it would have just disappeared. The fact that it's still around and people read it, and some people actually like it, quite a lot of people actually like it, that feels like a victory of sorts.
And most people who attacked it never read it in the first place.
Including this guy. By his own admission, he had never read anything I'd written.
And Alex, for you, someone said people come to this expecting a true crime story and they get something else. What are you hoping that people are taking away from the film?
Well, we live in a moment where we're kind of prodded to be vengeful every day on social media. You know, and in fact, social media is monetized in such a way so that you seek out places to get angry. And there are times when we should be angry, but it seemed to me that what was interesting about this and what Salman and Eliza were getting to was to find a way of hanging on to your principles without descending into resentment and hate. You know, what's that line from, I'm going to botch it, but from Mandela, the idea is like resentment is where you drink poison and think that it's going to kill your enemies. And there was something magnificent about in this moment about staying true to your principles, making a larger statement about creative expression, but doing so in a way that's life-affirming and love-affirming.
Because, Alex, as a documentarian, what do you make of the images that we're seeing now coming from Minnesota, and especially considering so much of it's being captured on cell phones? There seems like something remarkable in that in and of itself.
It's remarkable and disturbing all at the same time. I mean, what's great about it is that you have evidence. You have evidence of the truth in terms of this kind of state-sponsored terrorism being meted out on Americans. At the same time, it's disturbing because, starting with the murders of the fishermen in the Caribbean to the violence that's being meted on American citizens now by ICE, they're taking their own selfies and they're actually proudly displaying it on social media. So that is, it's a time where we really have to reckon with not only how to take images and what that means, but how do we receive them in ways that take us someplace further.
Because, Salman, many Americans right now, I think, are learning to live with violence in ways that they're just simply not used to. And do you have any thoughts on what it's like for people who are, the things we are seeing in our streets?
You know, I mean, this is a country with almost as many guns as people. And if you live in that kind of a state, leaving aside the issue of state violence, just the fact that there is violent crime almost every day in America. I mean, actually many times a day sometimes. So I've always worried about that here, that starting with the issue of gun violence, and now mob violence and state violence. So, yeah, I mean, this country needs to find its way out of that jam.